Alright, in the second video I'm going to talk about how to actually go from the process of making changes into a file all the way to creating a test app and getting it into production on Heroku. So maybe one thing to start with about this is that you might think of Heroku as basically just it's a server, and it essentially looks for a couple of files and uses those files to understand what it should be deploying and what it should be, like how it should be behaving. And so just a quick example of some of the files you might have noticed in the repo already. There's this one called app.json. And what this thing is doing is that when we upload stuff to Heroku, it looks inside of here and it looks for essentially directions on what it should do. Now in this case, we don't really tell it to do much. Like, as a matter of fact, none of this really tells it to do anything special, and so it kind of defaults to like some default behavior where it basically looks for this file called procfile, and in here we say web and node server.js, and so it just looks in here and it looks for this file called server.js, and it makes a web app. There's other things we can do in here. The most important other one, I think, is one called worker, and that's where we can create workers that run on some schedule to update a database or something like that. We don't have that in here right now, but we'll almost certainly need it once we integrate with Google Calendar and Slack. So these two files are really the most important for making sure that that Heroku looks at our files and runs them correctly. So definitely don't delete either of them. There's a lot of other stuff that can be in this file. As a matter of fact, if you look online at their example, they have a line in here about Postgres or something else that's in here. There's actually another file that you might have seen in the history of the repo that actually I'd messed this up, and so it wasn't deploying correctly. For now, this is fine, but I think in the future we'll actually need to add some stuff. Cool. So from here, we're going to go through this process of actually getting stuff on Heroku, and Heroku will, once again, basically be looking at this file and deciding, hey, should I be deploying this? It'll say yes, and it'll create a test app, and then we're going to move that test app from testing to staging to production. So just looking at our repo here, we can see that we have just one branch, which is the master branch. I went ahead, oh, and also on here we can see that there's no pull requests, there's only staging, and there's our production app. So I went ahead and made some small changes to what I have in here, and I'm going to go ahead and make a new branch, just going to see what's on there right now. So all I have is that. So I'm going to go get checkout. I think it's like this, and I'm going to call it Slack test. Cool. So I'm on this new branch, and I believe that this should also have my changes. I believe I also have to, let me just look at my reference. Yeah, I need to do this as well. So this actually pushes my branch onto the repo. So and give it a second. Okay, cool. Now what I'd expect to see now is if I go back onto GitHub. Yep, so we have one more new branch. That's what I just pushed up. Very minimal changes. I just changed a couple lines just to illustrate. But I'm going to create a new PR. Cool. And so we can see that we have one new PR here. And if we go over here and I just refresh this, I would expect to see a change on the left side of the pipeline in the test app area. Cool. So we can see that it created noodle cow PR3, and we can see that it's actually generating the app. You can even see the logs as it's creating it. It's like going through this process of reading the proc file, reading app.js, and just reading the files themselves, like the server.js file. It always gives you this little thing if you look at this, where it goes through this process. In this case, it looks like it was successful. Now, if I actually just click on this and I open it in the browser, this works. So it just created a new test app. Now, note right now that the code that's in here is distinct from what's in these two. Now, right now, staging and production have the same code behind them. And you can tell that because right here, this is actually the ID of the PR, or the branch, one or the other, that is actually being used on this app, whereas we have this different one that's on our test app. Now let's say that we wanted to actually move this over here, because the way you might think about it is that like this is our main app, and right now it has this is our like main URL, and if we were to like buy a website and host it, then this is what it would be. Then it would be that website. Whereas the one that we just made has some kind of weird URL. Yeah, noodlecow PR3. So right now, the step I would need to do in order to get this test app into staging is that I would have to actually accept the PR and merge it into master. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll go over here. Once again, I didn't really change much, so not going to be any conflicts. I'm going to merge this. Cool. Going to delete the branch. Now I'm going to go back over here. Now we'll notice that this is now empty. This is the number that we saw before, and I think I'd actually set it to auto deploy this into production in this specific case. Let me just check this really quick. Oh no, so this is different. So we can see here that this has been deployed. I can look at this one as well, and it's deployed on Cal staging. This URL will never change, at least for this one. And if I want, I can promote it to production. Now, once again, we can see that these are two different PRs right here, or two different deploys, because they actually have different IDs. And you can even follow the history of them if you want. And so if I were to promote this one to production, then I'd expect that this number would be over here, and master would now be fully updated with the changes that we've made to the repo. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It asks me some stuff. Cool. And release v25. So that's the flow for getting something from the initial stage of making changes to code on your branch all the way to getting it into production. And once again, there's a lot of benefits to doing it this way. We won't necessarily take advantage of all of them, but we could theoretically have like different, basically different databases, one for staging and one for production, and we'd have different environment variables set up on this one so that we're not hitting like a production database. We can also theoretically have multiple PRs over here, and have the ability to test all of them at once. I think we could even theoretically have multiple staging apps, though in our case I think that might add a little more complexity than we want.